This podcast is part of the Michigan Sports and Entertainment Podcast Network. Go to michigansportsandentertainment.com for more great podcasts.
Look out, Larkin's wide open. There's the pass. He's in the clear. Scores! Dylan Larkin!
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to this week's episode of the Hockeytown Rundown Podcast. I am your host, as always, Chase Sussex. I'm joined by Jay Croft. How you doing, Jay?
Good. How you doing today?
I'm good. We just wrapped up. We had a lot going on in Red Wings news. We just had the big draft that just happened and the development camp, so there's plenty to talk about this week. I'm certainly ready to dive in because there's a lot of interesting topics, and we've got an exciting episode for you guys this week, so I'm definitely ready to get going this week.
So this, this draft was definitely, it definitely went in a different direction than we thought it would when it got to the Red Wings pick. So I don't know if you want to start there. We can, for anybody who's kind of a casual Wings fan or hockey fan, if you did not watch the draft, the first two picks went as we expected them to. No surprise there, right? I mean, you had Jack Hughes going first to New Jersey, and there was some rumblings that, possibly they would go a different direction, but I really never thought that they would. I don't think you did either, did you?
No, yeah. I mean, those are pretty much the definitive top two picks, and I think it really just made sense for everybody there.
Kako goes number 2 to the Rangers, and I was surprised, though, with the third pick. I thought that was actually the first, I wouldn't say shocker, but it was definitely a surprise. Kirby Dach from the Saskatoon Blades and WHL going to Chicago with a third pick. A lot of people had Chicago taking either Turcotte or Bowen Byram, but the fourth pick was Bowen Byram, and he ended up going to the Colorado Avalanche. So that was a pretty big pickup for them, and that defense is just going to continue to get better with, they already have Cal McCarr. A lot of people are talking about Tyson Barrie now possibly being available, and Tyson Barrie had been linked to the Red Wings in previous seasons as a potential, I think he's a right-handed defenseman, but he's an offensive-minded defenseman, definitely a good player, but I think he's going to be looking for some big money soon, so I think Colorado's probably looking at making some changes there. So keep an eye out, folks, for Tyson Barrie, because he's a guy that I don't know that the Wings actually have interest in him right now, but it's, you kind of put him up there with all the other guys that have been rumored to possibly be targets in the next year, guys like Torrey Krug, Trouba. Trouba's not been signed to a long-term deal. He only got traded to the Rangers recently, and that was a 1 year. He's got 1 year left on his deal. So, or no, is he a free agent right now, or is it one? He's got 1 year left on his contract. That's why Winnipeg traded him, because they didn't want to lose him for nothing. So, So the fifth pick was LA taking Alex Turcotte from the U.S. National Development Team. No surprise there. But then at number 6, we were both kind of hoping that it was going to be Trevor Zegras or possibly Cole Caulfield, but then we got one hell of a surprise with, Eisman walking up to the podium and saying, from the DEL, the Red Wings select Moritz Seider. So what's your thoughts on this pick, Chase?
It was definitely an interesting pick out of the gates. I think we were all kind of surprised. I mean, Steve Eisman walked up in absolute, Steve Eisman fashion. I thought it was pretty funny that all the other GMs were like, super thankful for the city of Vancouver for hosting, and, thanked all the fans back at their stadium. And Eisman just walked in and straight up announced the pick. And
that was great.
That's such an Eisman move there. But yeah, once I heard, from Mannheim to the DEL, I was like, what in the world? You know, and I had heard of Moritz Seider before. Like I was familiar with the pick, and because I did do some research on some of the defensemen, and he was actually one of the better defensemen I looked at. I mean, he wasn't as high on my list as maybe the Red Wings had him on their list, but he was definitely up there. I mean, he was one of the top defensemen in the draft. I mean, I had him basically behind Byram and Broberg. He was basically my third best defenseman in the draft. But I honestly think he has the potential to become, you know, a better player, a better defenseman than Broberg, in my opinion. I mean,
I do. I agree. I honestly, what I thought happened is after the Red Wings took Seider, you started seeing the run on defensemen come. I mean, like Edmonton could have taken Zegras. They took Broberg, you know. So after that, you know, that was at pick 8. So you know, Buffalo took Cousins right after we took Seider. Broberg is taken by Edmonton. Zegras ends up going to Anaheim, and then you've got Podkolzin going to Vancouver. Then Soderstrom, the defenseman, he ends up going to Arizona, and then Cam York and Thomas Harley are the other two defensemen that, and then another guy, Ville, I don't know if it's Heinola. So you got quite a bit of, 3 defensemen got taken right in a row. Lassie Thompson, Thomas Harley. So in the top 20, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 defensemen. I think, if I'm counting right in here. So, I mean, that's a lot of D compared to what we were hearing. I mean, it ended up making other players get pushed further down than I expected. Like it ended up having an effect on how far down a guy like Alex Newhook got taken. Like he got taken at 16. So Colorado walks out with both not Alex Turcotte. They get Bowen Byram and Alex Newhook.
God, that's I mean, let me tell you, I mean, as you know, this is a Red Wings podcast. I'm not going to get too off topic here, but I think Colorado, as much as the rivalry's there, they had seriously one of the best drafts out of any other team. I mean, honestly, they have an excellent haul for the draft. I think Carolina as well also had a really good haul from the draft. A lot of really good prospects there on both ends, but Colorado got some absolute steals there in the first round. There were a lot of teams that ended up getting steals in the first round. I mean, I can't remember the team that drafted Caulfield. It was Montreal. Yeah,
they got him at 15.
Yeah, at 15. That's ridiculous.
And he was taken after Cam York, which surprised me because Cam York is a good player, but I mean, he's not known for having like the hardest shot or anything. He's a good quarterback, I guess, but but you have a bona fide goal scorer, 72 goals last year. I'm surprised that he fell for all the talk about how DeBrincat changed everything, and now Caulfield, he's probably going to go a lot earlier now because teams aren't going to want to pass on that, and he still fell to 15.
Yeah,
it's kind of and he fell to 15, and you've got guys like Victor Soderstrom, Vasily Podkolzin. I mean, Vancouver's taking a chance on a Russian player like that when that you've got a guy that, I mean, can't you imagine if you're Vancouver having a guy like, Pettersson, like passing the puck over to Caulfield?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, imagine having Caulfield and Bosser on the same line.
Yeah.
That would be crazy. So, it is kind of shocking to me that he fell. Matthew Boldy was taken 12th, so he was taken, a few spots ahead of Caulfield even. And Boldy's known for being a good goal scorer too, but probably more of a complete player, but definitely not as good of a goal scorer as Caulfield. So the Wings overall, I thought they had a really good draft. I mean, I'm happy with what they did. Even in the second round, they stuck with defense again. I don't know the guy very well. I mean, Antti Tuomisto.
Yeah,
is the guy they took with their first pick in that second round. And then they ended up taking Robert Mastrosimone, which we like that pick. He's a really good USHL player that looks like, he was a steal where they got him at. So, they had I thought they had a good draft. I mean, I thought they did pretty good. It's just Albert Johansson, another defenseman. So three 3 of the first 4 picks are defensemen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, that tells me that there is definitely, an agenda that Yzerman had. I know they say that that's not the case. I know they weren't like, we have to go defense as much as possible. They're not going to say that they were, just trying to go with all defense. But I think the actions speak, that Yzerman can't be happy with what he's seeing in the cupboard, other than, the guys that we've already talked about.
Mm.
Hronek and Cholowski, you've got Gustav Lindstrom. I mean, obviously there's some players that we do like, but there's also been a lot of swing and misses in the last few drafts. McIsaac hopefully turns out to be something after he recovers from his injury. But I think, to me, this Moritz Seider pick, man, I'm excited about it. Just watching him in development camp. It's both that and then seeing other writers and even Scotty Bowman coming out and saying that he was a hell of a player. I mean, that he's got a lot of credibility.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. That's big. And, that's the thing. We saw a lot of him in development camp, and he had a really good camp. If you guys didn't see, I mean, if you looked at, there was this one play that I remember seeing on Twitter. I mean, his puck possession was, is incredible. It looked basically like he was just, his ability to, his unwillingness, I guess, to sort of turn over the puck. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, he's a really good skater. He's got, he's got a good hockey IQ. Like that's the thing I like about him the most. I mean, his IQ is there. He's a really smart player. He's a strong defenseman. I mean, obviously he can work on strength, but I mean, this kid's been playing, amongst men and in the German league. And this is a kid, who didn't necessarily play a lot last year, I guess. I mean, he played I think 27 games, I think, in his hometown team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, he definitely, when you see him play out there against the other prospects, he definitely stood out, and he made a couple plays, and a couple of them were risky. I don't know if it was like a turnaround, like a spin around type thing he did, but he did a couple things really sharp, high end elite skating type plays to get away from the forward and make the play up the ice and saw him score a couple goals. I mean, to me, it looks like when you watch him, you can just tell, okay, this guy is a first round talent. This guy is clearly a level above our other defensive prospects in terms of his hockey IQ and knowing where everyone's at and being able to read the play. You saw him motioning to his defensive partner where to go, who to take. You love to see that from from an 18-year-old kid. I mean, he's clearly comfortable in his own skin. He's not running out of position to make a bunch of hits yet. I mean, obviously he's playing against, not really teammates, I guess. So I mean, they're not going to go out there and try to kill each other. But there were some hits. I mean, there were some definite hits thrown. And I mean, I don't know if you watched very much of the development games, but there was a pretty nice exchange there between. Gosh, man, the name is escaping me, but it's Albin Greve or Groove. Yeah. It's actually Groove, I believe.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's almost like groovy, but it's from what I understand, it's Groove or Groove. I
thought it was just Grew, but I don't know.
Well, they said it wrong at the draft.
Oh, okay. Well,
from what I
mean,
understand.
because it's the same thing with Oliver Koski, right? Because his is it's the W, right?
Yeah, it's actually a V. It's a W, but they say it like a V. I guess.
Oliver, yeah, I think that's the same thing with his with Grew or Groovy or how Groove. I think that's the same spelling that they've got going on there. It's kind of that V, sounding with the W. I think it's just where he's from. What is that? Finnish, I think. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know.
Groove is from Sweden.
Sweden, right? Yeah. So,
but Koski is from
Finland. Okay.
It was Elmer Soderblom. That's the guy he got in a tangle with.
Oh, that kid's oh my God, the Soderblom kid's like 6'7" is what I meant to say.
Yeah,
he's definitely not 7 foot, but he's pretty close.
And they're not buying into the whole, smaller is better thing that's been going on lately with these drafts. I mean, they, other than a couple of the forwards they picked up, I mean, they've got the defense for the most part are all big boys. I mean, they're not drafting little guys on defense. Yeah. I mean, and I think just watching the St. Louis Stanley Cup, win. I mean, that's kind of what they had going on too. I mean, those guys back there are durable. They could take hits and they could give hits. They were able to get the puck out of the zone, and you need strength to be able to do that. You don't have to be 6'7" to do that, but if you're 6'7" and you can move the puck out efficiently and you can actually generate, offense, by a good first pass, that's, hey, I'll take a 6'7" guy.
Speaking of that was definitely a good point to make. I mean, they definitely had some size. I think that one center they drafted was like literally like paperweight size. He's like what? He's like 5'9",
148.
Yeah, 148.
Ethan Phillips. Yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
But he's a hell of a skater. I mean,
he's a good skater.
Really, probably the fastest skater on the ice during development camp. I mean, one of them. He definitely stood out. Mm-hmm. His speed stood out, and he made some really good plays in development camp. But obviously, you can't play in the league at 148 pounds and expect to, not walk out with some broken bones.
Yeah.
So he's gonna have to put the weight on, but.
He'll have to put the weight on, but I know a lot of people say he plays bigger than he actually is, which is a good sign. But he definitely needs to put some. I mean, like that's what I'm saying. These kids are 18 years old. They've got plenty of time to put some muscle on and and build some weight because they're all teenagers, so they'll have time. I mean, Ethan Phillips was 5th round or
fourth round.
So I mean, he's probably not going to see the league for another couple of years, so he'll definitely be able to put on more weight, and he definitely won't stay 148 for too long.
Yeah, he's kind of in that, look, 4th rounders don't typically make the NHL all that often. It's kind of like at that point, this is what we were talking about way before, like in previous episodes. Like I don't want to see the Wings draft safe players in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. Like draft guys that have high upside. Like, hey, we know this guy is like way too thin, but if he can fill out, damn, he could be special, because of this. Like they have elite skill sets in some areas where the other prospects in that round don't. So I would rather have an Ethan Phillips who they really feel strongly has some high-end upside on the offensive side of the puck than to draft a 6'3" defenseman that's already 200 pounds but doesn't skate well, has average hockey IQ, and is more of a defensive defenseman. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, you might as well go for the home run when you're picking at that point, because if they turn out to be something, you never know. It could end up turning out to be the next, Pavel Datsyuk or Zetterberg or something. I mean, who would have ever thought those guys would have? A lot of people thought Zetterberg's skating was ugly when he was, drafted, and that's probably one of the reasons he was drafted in the 7th round. So, you never know. It's unlikely today in today's NHL with all the scouts and how much investment that teams have made in that you're going to find guys that are going to turn out to be that special. That it's hard to believe you're going to find another like superstar drafted, in the 6th or 7th round, but it's possible. I think at the end of the day, you're just hoping that, hey, could you find the next Tyler Bertuzzi in the 4th or 5th round, Yeah, exactly. And it looks like from what we've seen in all the, even in the pre-draft discussions and especially in the post-draft and what we saw in camp, that Albin Gruve is going to be one of my favorite prospects to watch because this kid has offensive upside. He can score. He can skate good. He's got good hockey IQ. But he is a pain in the ass to play against, from what I understand. He loves... Yeah. We already talked about him before, but I mean, you saw it on display. I mean, he got into that scuffle with Soderblom. He was kind of, giving other guys a hard time. I mean, I'm really excited to see this guy play at the NHL level one day. And I really think because of that sandpaper he brings something totally different. I think a guy like Giovanni Smith, needs to be on his game, because I think that's kind of what Giovanni Smith was supposed to be when they drafted him in the second round years ago, is that, that power forward guy that, that's got some offensive upside, but is real just a pain in the butt to play against. Well, Groove seems to be even more offensively skilled, a better skater. So, I think guys like that, guys like a Giovanni Smith, they're going to have to up their game if they really want to crack at a bottom, I don't know about a bottom 6 role, but he's going to have to up his game, because I think to me, that's kind of what the role would be for a guy like a Groove. He could probably be like a really, really effective third line guy, maybe even better. I don't know. I mean, look at Tyler Bertuzzi's on the first line right now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so like I said, I mean, you mentioned what was his name? I can't remember. I don't know. I was literally just going to talk about him, but I blanked on it. But yeah, I mean, I think Groove is definitely an interesting pick there, and the fact that
he's one of my favorite picks of the draft.
He's one of my favorite picks, and there were, like I said, besides the Seider pick, I really liked the Master Simone pick. Unfortunately, he broke his ankle, which is so unfortunate. I was really, I was pretty upset about that, just because, I don't know. I was really looking forward to see. He had a pretty good camp before that happened. I mean, he was, he broke his ankle blocking a shot. So, I mean, clearly it's not like he was, he just, something happened to, but like he literally just, I mean, he was, put his body in the, just threw his legs in front of the player. I didn't exactly see the play where he broke his ankle per se, but,
yeah, I didn't either. But he was very impressive.
Yeah.
Throughout the 3-on-3 tournament that I saw, I didn't really get a chance to watch him too much in the red and white game, but a lot of talk about how effective he was during the development camp. So I think that was a really solid pick. I think because he plays in the USHL, I think that he fell a little bit further.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought he could possibly be an early second round, late first round guy, just based on the skill set. He's got to develop a little bit more strength, obviously, to his game, and probably a little bit more of a two-way game. I don't really know much about how he is on the defensive side of the puck, but as far as his offensive skill, it's pretty high end from what I understand. So that was a really good pick, and I think he could end up being a really good. He could end up being a really good prospect for the Red Wings if they just give him some time to develop. They're not. It's not like they're in any hurry to get him up here. So
yeah. The other player I was thinking of was Giovanni Smith. I wanted to kind of bring him up because, I mean, he's been one of those guys. I mean, I'm not going to touch on him too much, but I mean, he's one of those guys I was really hoping would kind of develop. And like you said, Groove kind of plays a similar role that he does. But he's been he's been stuck in Toledo for a while now, right? He hasn't really been. He played a little bit with the Griffins, didn't he? Or has he always played with Toledo?
No, he played with the Griffins. He played 64 games with Grand Rapids last year.
Okay, well.
6 goals, 7 assists, 13 points, 86 penalty minutes. From what I understand, hearing from an interview with Sean Horkoff, at the end of the season, he had a rough adjustment to the pro leagues at first. Okay. I think he was trying to be a different type of player. I don't really know what was behind it all, but I guess, like a lot of guys going from juniors, he was an OHL player, so he's going right from juniors to the pro leagues. AHL is not an easy league to play in, I think.
No, not at all.
So I think from what they say, though, he definitely made some adjustments, and I think part of it was his workout, like his physical training and his commitment to getting in the gym and, and doing the things that they want him to do off the ice. I think, they kind of had a heart-to-heart with him, from what I understand, and he definitely made some changes there. So I would expect, for Giovanni Smith, he was a 2016 pick. So, if he's going to make it to the Red Wings at some point, he's definitely going to have to step it up this year. I think he's going to have a really good year because, he's in competition with a lot of other prospects that, are kind of drafted around his spot. I mean, you got a guy like Svechnikov who's going to be vying for a position pretty soon. I mean, he was injured most of the year, or the whole year pretty much. So, he's not going to be, sitting around waiting for Giovanni Smith to take a spot. I mean, they're both likely they're fighting for a third line, fourth line type role right now. I mean, you'd like to see Svechnikov pushing for more ice time, but realistically, if he makes the Red Wings this year, he's probably going to be a third line guy.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I mean, I don't know. He didn't. No. I don't really think he competed in camp. Did he? Is he healthy now? I know he's like.
Yeah. He's like. They can actually, based on the rules, because he missed the whole year, they actually can put him in Grand Rapids this year. So if he doesn't make the Red Wings, they don't have to give up on him because he doesn't have to go through waivers for them to send him down. So thankfully they have that because I really still feel that Svechnikov could be a really good player for us. I don't know that he'll ever live up to where he was picked, but when he was figuring out where, what kind of game he needed to play in the NHL level, which is more of a cycle guy, like be able to hold on to the puck, a board guy, be able to have strong board play. Mm-hmm. I think he could really be a real nice piece for us. So I'm glad that they're going to have the whole year. He'll have the opportunity to play in Grand Rapids if he's not ready. And it's kind of hard to imagine that he's going to be right off the bat. He's going to be more ready to play in the NHL this year than a guy like, say, Veleno, who we'll talk about, who looked pretty darn good in camp, had a dominant junior season. I mean, I guess it all just kind of depends on how well his recovery has gone. And Svechnikov's ability to train and add some strength to his game. If that kid adds some strength to him, and he could really be a real good third line winger, I think, for us. That's kind of what I see long term for him. And if he can push, like he could be a top 6 guy, great. But I mean, we haven't seen enough from him to say that. So.
But yeah, so I mean, I think overall, I think that was definitely an interesting draft. I personally, I know there were a lot of people who were upset with the draft. I know, at least that's what I saw. I mean, everyone likes to be their own GM. It's everyone's the Twitter GM and gets to go on there and say they didn't, they were upset with how they drafted. But honestly, I thought it was really good. I mean, that's what I think Yzerman came in here to do, and was to take risks. And they took a risk on, I don't know, and what he didn't even call the Cider pick a risky pick. He was like, he was pretty much the number one he was high on their board. He was high on their list. So it's not a risk pick for him if it's, if he's a player that he really likes, you know what I mean? I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he said something to Elliot Friedman when he said, this is kind of a, I don't know what, I can't remember exactly what the word he used, but basically like he didn't see it as going off the charts or being that big of a risk. Look, I think personally, I still think Trevor Zegras is going to be a special player in the NHL. I was really, really hoping that that's who they would pick. And after they said Cider, I'm going to tell you, I was initially disappointed. I wasn't mad because I kind of still feel like, okay, there's a reason they took this guy. They must have saw something. They must see something in him. There's been a lot of attention on him. Like a lot of other teams were wanting to get him, but I don't think they thought that he would fall. Or I don't think that they felt the Wings or anybody else would take him at that point. So I don't think any team really felt like it was an issue that if they were going to target him, we better take him, because if we don't, someone else will. The Wings obviously knew that this was the guy that they wanted, and they were feeling strong enough that, he was going to provide just as big, if not a bigger impact to the team than a guy like a Zegras or a Caulfield or a Cousins or whoever. You know, I know from talking from what Yzerman said to somebody in the interview after, there might have been Helene St. James in an interview right after, like right on the draft floor, that they had interest in a couple CHL players because they asked him about, you know, hey, you guys didn't take any Canadian players this year, right? Which is kind of shocking. No players from the CHL. First time ever. I don't think the Red Wings have not taken someone from that league.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And so he had said, well, it's not like we intentionally, you know, didn't take anybody from that league. He's like, in fact, you know, there were definitely a couple players that were taken earlier that if they were available, we would have really had it would have been a pretty tough decision. And those two players would have been Kirby Dach and Bowen Byram.
That makes the most sense. I mean,
those are the only two Canadian players taken ahead of the Red Wings.
Yeah.
So I mean, because you know, what's his name, Caulfield, not Caulfield, but you know, the other guys that were taken were, you know, Jack Hughes, Capo Caco. Obviously, that's U.S. team, and then Finland. You know, Doc is Canadian Hockey League. Bowen Byram, Turcotte was National Development Team. So it seems to me like those are the two guys. Like if either one of those guys were available, they may not have gone with Seider. We don't know for sure. If it was Bowen Byram, I would bet you. I would bet you for sure it would have been Bowen Byram they would have taken. But I think they wanted to go defense if the guy was there, and I think they just looked at, okay, you know, these kids that we're looking at are really, really good, but we have a chance to get a right-handed, you know, big defenseman that's got, you know, elite hockey sense, very, you know, high-end skating. His offensive output is not, you're not seeing it right now because he really didn't play big minutes with the men's team, but he
the potential is there.
Well, he didn't get any power play time.
Yeah, he didn't get any power play time.
So, I mean, that's where you can rack up a lot of assists and a lot of points there. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of offensive upside, but you didn't really see it, which is why a lot of people did not consider him to be a top 10 pick. A lot of people had him going 15 or less, you know. So, I don't know, man. I think that this is going to prove out to be a pretty good pick for the Red Wings. You know, will he ever live up to a number 6 pick? I don't know, but guess what? If he ends up being a top pairing defenseman and, you know, he can help out a guy like a Hronek, you know, where he can be a good two-way, because I really think that, you know, between you got Hronek, Cholowski, you know, we don't really know anybody else in the system that has the offensive skill set that those guys do. But, you know, I like the way that their defensive prospects are starting to round out. I mean, Seider is a two-way defenseman. Gustav Lindstrom is a more of a two-way defenseman, physical presence. You know, they've got, you know, I think a guy like Regula that they picked up last year's draft. Yeah, Alec Regula. He's more of a two-way I don't know about a stay-at-home defenseman, but he had a really strong year. And the only reason he didn't get as many minutes is because he played on the same team as I believe he played for London, right? Yeah, he played in the same team as Bouchard. Yeah, and the guy that Chicago drafted last year on defense. I mean, the London Knights have a stacked team. Adam Boakfist, that's who it was.
Yeah, Boakfist, right.
So he still had 39 points, 11 goals, 28 assists. I think Regula is a dark horse for us. And then obviously you got Jared McIsaac. So there's some pretty exciting prospects in our D pool now that we didn't have before. And Alex Seider, you know, just adds to that in addition to the other guys that they drafted. So this, to me, you know, you're starting to see it take shape.
No, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you're starting to see, you know, and a lot of people were, I mean, I guess including myself, were not necessarily concerned about the defensive, you know, depth. But I mean, if you look at it next season, they're going to have a lot of holes in the defense once they lose guys like Daly and Eriksson. And not those are necessarily super hard holes to fill because those guys can those guys necessarily aren't the greatest, but I mean, Mike Green probably won't be around for too long. I don't know what his contract will be, is necessarily like.
This is supposed to be his last year.
Yeah, it's last year. So, like I said, you're losing a lot of guys. I mean, you got DeKaiser around. Obviously, you've got Hronek and, probably Cholowski coming up. So, I mean, you're a little thin on defense there over the next couple of years. So, I think, addressing defense now makes the most sense. I think what we saw last year is the fact that I know so many people were upset the fact that we didn't, or that the Red Wings didn't take Quinn Hughes. And that's the part that confused me. I think all the people who were so upset about the Moritz Seider pick, everyone last year was like, oh, we shouldn't have drafted Zadina or Veleno. I don't think people were complaining more about – I think people complained more about Veleno than they did Zadina. But people were like, well, we should have addressed defense, in the first round. And then this year we addressed – the Red Wings addressed defense and people are upset about the pick.
I think it's mostly because no one knew who he was.
Yeah.
I think most casual hockey fans, they knew about a lot of this is on the fault of the media. Like all the talk was about, who should go at 6, like, oh, it's going to be Kirby Doc or Cousins or Caulfield or Zegras. Like those were the names everybody was hearing, right? I mean, and that's who we focused on in our polls too. Yeah, we didn't bring up Moritz Seider or the Broberg or anything like that. I mean, we felt those offensive guys were the value picks there. So I think it's perfectly okay to be shocked. Be like, what the hell? Who is that? Yeah. And I remember sitting there. I was in my hotel room because I was on vacation, and I'm like, I pulled up my phone. I was watching the draft on my phone, and Yzerman goes up there, and I'm hoping that he's going to say, from the U.S. National Development Team, Trevor Zegras, and I heard from the DEL from Mannheim. Yeah. I'm like,
Moritz Seider, and you're
who
like,
is that? And I had heard of him too, but I didn't put much like time investment into learning about him because I didn't think there was any chance the Red Wings were going to, take that, unless he fell in the second round, which Yzerman said, absolutely he was not going to fall to 35. There's no way.
A lot of people didn't even see him fall out of the top 10. I mean, because honestly, if you didn't take Seider there, that's what, you'd think that
Ken Holland could have took him.
Ken Holland probably would have snatched him up, and that's why I think that's why I think it's a smart pick. I think it was unfair to I think it's it's hard for fans to be like, oh, I don't know who this guy is, so he's not a good pick. That's not a fair assessment of a player.
They got the player they wanted.
They got the player that they wanted. And that's what you have to. I did research on Moritz Seider. I knew who the kid was. Like I said, regardless of the fact, I did the prospect, as much research as we did personally on, guys like all the centers and forwards and stuff like that. Obviously, I did my own research on defensemen and that they could possibly take, and even goaltenders. Not that they were going to take a goalie at 6, but they explored trading down. And I know Yzerman mentioned that. I said he tried to trade down from 6 to draft Seider, and no one was biting. But a guy like Spencer Knight, who the Florida Panthers I believe drafted. I can't remember exactly where they picked, but they picked like in the top 15 if I'm not mistaken. And like I said, you really have to pay attention to every prospect, because it's stuff like this happens in the draft every year, and this is in every league. You know what I mean? There are international guys who I think in hockey especially, you can't just look at I know that they're hyping up best player available, but guys rise and guys fall all the time. So I think it was definitely an interesting pick. I definitely can't say I was expecting it, but he was someone who was on my list as well. And he's a good kid. I mean, he's a great, like you mentioned, great hockey IQ, elite skating, offensive potential through the roof. I mean, that's all you can look for in a defenseman, honestly. I really don't think you can ask for much more than that. I mean, other than asking for Bowen Byram,
which wasn't going to happen.
But that's the thing. I mean, I saw him slip past Chicago. I was like, maybe there's a chance, but after you got drafted, defensemen slipped my mind. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't thinking in my head after Byron was taken. I was like, there's not going to be as many defensemen taken in the top, 15 because, you know, if Byram's off the board, you might see like one or two. Like I was thinking maybe you see like a Broberg or a Soderstrom. And I thought even more at Seider. I said, you know, maybe Seider goes towards the end of the 15 or 20, but I don't think, you know, and anyone would consider him in the top, anyone could consider any of those guys in the top 10. And clearly two more defensemen went like in the next 3 picks.
Well, so. and LA walked out with both Alex Turcotte and Bjornfoot, which is supposed to be a really good defenseman too.
Yeah, so, Bjornfoot's going to be good too.
I'll tell you what, the way that the first round, ended up going, I almost feel like the Blackhawks, like you got a lottery pick. You had no business being in that top 3 position based on where you finished, right? Mm-hmm. And I almost feel like if we knew you were going to pick Doc all along, we should have just traded with the Red Wings and moved down and got the 6th pick, and you could have probably got Doc at 6. I don't know. I mean, no,
I understand where you're coming from.
You know what I'm saying? Like the Red Wings, if to me, if the Red Wings are picking at 3, they definitely would have picked Bowen Byram, and I don't see that Turcotte would have gone. Like, I don't see that LA would have taken Doc over Turcotte, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, there was really no true consensus on what was going to happen beyond, the first and second pick. I mean, there was a lot of talk about it's going to be Turcotte and Byram, but it obviously didn't. It went Doc. So we got Seider, and that's what it is. And I don't know if you want to just talk for a little bit and transition to what we saw in development camp. I mean, I saw quite a bit of it. You saw some of it. Moritz Seider definitely looked pretty damn good in camp.
He looked pretty dang good in camp. Yeah, we can definitely dive into some of the development camp because that was definitely something we saw for sure. There was a lot that happened, and we already mentioned, like I said, Master Simoni, we already mentioned, broke his ankle in development camp. But there's a lot of things, a lot of positives I think we could definitely point out with the development camp for sure. I know there were a lot of, there was a lot that we saw. I know one player that you mentioned off air was Taro Hirose. I think we both mentioned that it had a really good development camp, and Joe Veleno was another one that we mentioned off air as well. We had mentioned it earlier as well on the podcast, but I think both of those guys definitely stood out in camp, and I think those were two guys I think people were definitely excited to see, other than Zadina, in development camp. So it was good to see those guys kind of break out and have a good camp.
Yeah, another guy I thought had a really good camp and stood out to me, and I think he needed to have a standout camp, was Kufner. Yeah. He put up some goals, and that's what he was signed to do. I think he's destined for Grand Rapids next year, but I think he needed to have a good showing here because I thought his 10-game audition or whatever at the end of last year was a little bit, I don't know, he didn't look like out of place, but he didn't look like he really was contributing in any meaningful way. Whereas Taro Hirose, I don't know, is Taro or Taro?
It's Taro.
Yeah, he fit right in, man, and I thought he looked really good, and he has this confidence about him. It's kind of like, yeah, I got this. Just the look on his face when he skates, just like he's got that smirk, and it's just like he made a play and scored like a beautiful goal in the 3-on-3. And then he did he scored another goal in the shootout, and he scored it, and it was just kind of like, yep, I got this. Wasn't, he didn't make a huge deal out of it, but he doesn't come off cocky, but he just has this quiet confidence about, he knows that when he's on the ice, he can see what's going on, and he knows, his hockey IQ to me is I think gonna be the thing that everyone knows him for, is he's got a knack for finding people, and he made some really slick passes during camp. So Taro Hirose for me, for sure. I can't see how he isn't playing on the Red Wings next year.
No, yeah, I feel like he's almost a lock. And if you guys have been following, I'm not sure how much you guys follow college hockey per se, but I'm big into watching college hockey just because I'm a big Michigan hockey fan. And if you guys have been following him from Michigan State, I mean, this kid's an absolute stud. Taro Hirose, been watching him since I think 2016 maybe. if you guys pay attention to college hockey, you definitely should, because you'll see the guys like Cam York, I believe, is committed to Michigan, and a couple other guys from the development team.
Oh, he's going to Michigan?
Yeah, he's going to Michigan.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, there's like it's Cam York, and then there's one other player. I can't remember exactly who it is. I'm going to look it up in just a second. But Taro Hirose has been a kid who I think he won he made like Big Ten first all team last year as a senior, and before his tryout, and like you mentioned, he looked like he fit right in, and it was like, I don't know, like he basically like didn't take a stop from, or a step down from what he was doing at Michigan State. I mean, if you watched him play, I mean, the kid was absolutely spectacular. Like I said, high hockey IQ, he was a great playmaker, good vision on the ice, and he definitely showed that with the Red Wings as well. And so I think definitely he's almost, I wouldn't necessarily say a shoe-in, but he's almost a lock to kind of.
I think it's almost his job to lose at this point.
Exactly.
I thought he stood out. Jonathan Berggren had not played for quite a bit of last season because of his injury, but he looked very impressive. I mean, just to me stood out, which is what you want to see. The guy that I think everybody wants to talk about, though, is Joe Veleno. I mean, Joe Veleno looked like, to me, just like I thought, what's his name, Taro Hirose and Moritz Seider, like he stood out as being just a level above the other prospects, in his development. And to me, like, I think on this team, I mean, I think he's ready to play some NHL time. I don't know if he'll start here, but I know they're going to give him every opportunity to do that. And he might need a little bit more seasoning. But I don't think he's going to be in the AHL that long. I think if he is, I think it's going to be a short stint. I don't think
it'll be pretty short.
I don't think he's going to be in Grand Rapids for a whole season. I really don't. But we'll see. I mean, it is kind of exciting to think, if both Zadina and Veleno start the season out in Grand Rapids, them playing on the same line together and developing together and making each other look as good as possible. And it would be cool to see them both like on the same line for the Red Wings one day.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to see that. I can definitely see.
So if they don't end up making it, which we'll talk a little bit about our friend Helene St. James in a minute, but if they don't make it right away, I would love to see them both make it up together, coming from Grand Rapids and dominating the AHL, because I think both of them together. I mean, Veleno is more of a playmaker, but he can score. He's got elite skating. He's a two-way player now, really plus 63 for Drummondville last year, in addition to the 104 points that he scored.
Plus 63.
Yeah.
That's just incredible.
So, and plus minuses and everything. And that team was, that team was dominant, but. But still, I mean, that's pretty special, and I'm hoping that the two of them can really, because if you're going to put Zadina in Grand Rapids, if he's going to have to play there to start, if they don't think that he's quite ready yet for whatever reason, and most of those reasons we've heard is just more explosiveness, his first few steps, like being able to separate himself, building a little bit more strength in the weight room. It's not so much an issue with his ability to score or his hockey sense or anything like that. It's more of just physically being ready, right? If the two of them got to start out in Grand Rapids together, I'm definitely going to want to try to find a way to watch some of those games or get down there and see some games, because that to me would be really exciting. And I think Grand Rapids is going to have. I think Grand Rapids, that team's going to be pretty exciting. They're supposed to be bringing over Gustav Lindstrom this year. It's going to be playing for Grand Rapids from Sweden. People have been talking about him a lot. We don't know what's going to happen with Oliver Koski, if he's going to be playing for the Red Wings or they're going to start him out in Grand Rapids and see if he's ready. So there's definitely some talent there.
Absolutely.
Svechnikov will probably start the season off in Grand Rapids, depending on if the Red Wings sign anybody in free agency, depending on what spots are open. So, Kufner is going to be down there for the whole year. So I think that'll be exciting to keep an eye on. And that's good, because you want you want that to be a talented team because then they can help each other out and they can help, get those guys growing and playing together and learning together and coming up. And that's a lot of, if you look at Tampa Bay right now, that's a lot of what they did. That Norfolk team that they had, they grew up together. Mm-hmm. So camp to me was pretty exciting. I thought there was some really good plays. I saw a noticeable uptick in in just the skill set, like the creativity in the scrimmages. Like they definitely looked like, okay, these last 3 drafts worth of players. I mean, a guy like Jack Adams, I mean, he looks like he's gotten a lot better. He's huge. I mean, that guy's a big boy, man. Was he 6'5"?
6'5", I think.
Yeah, something like that. 6'5". I mean, he looked really good. That 2017 draft, I mean, a lot of those guys they've chosen not to sign, but you got Rasmussen that, obviously we've talked about him before. Gustav Lindstrom, we just talked about. Casper Consalo, I thought he looked good in camp. I know he kind of had a rough first year after his draft year. I don't think he scored any goals, but then he ended up doing well in the camp. But he's still with the organization. Keith Petruzzelli played pretty good in goal this week. Malty Setkov, I think this is a make it or break it year for him.
Yeah, he was a 2016 draft pick, wasn't he?
17.
2017.
Yeah, 4th round guy, but real big guy, but he doesn't really bring a lot of offense to the table, and he's not like a big hitter or anything. So he's got to kind of decide he's going to have to step it up another level to see what happens. But the rest of the guys, Jack Adams, like we said, he looked pretty good. But everybody else from that draft, they've chosen not to sign. And 2018, I mean. 2018, even Otto Kivenmaki, the little guy, put on they told him that he had to go put some weight on. He's got some real high-end offensive skill set, but the guy only weighs 155 pounds.
Yeah.
But he made some really good plays. I mean, so that's the thing we were talking about is, they took a chance in very late rounds with some of these smaller guys with elite hockey sense, and creativity. We'll see what they turn out to be. But the skill level was definitely on display this week.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to mention before we kind of segue a little bit. I looked up the other player who's going to Michigan hockey. It's Cam York, obviously from the U.S. development team, and then John Beecher, who got drafted by the Bruins.
Oh, okay.
Both of them. I actually didn't know that. I saw them announce it on their Twitter, like, oh man, Mel Pearson, who's the new head coach for the hockey team. The Michigan men's hockey team was like, I can't wait to, see you guys in Maize and Blue next year. I was like, really? I was like, I didn't know they committed to Michigan. So they've got 2 really good talented players coming in over there. But we'll kind of segue now. And what you were saying, you wanted to talk about a little bit about Helene St. James comments. And we talked about that a little bit last week or in last episode. And the fact that she still is sticking with her. Yeah,
I'm gonna let you start off with this one, Chase, because if I do, I'm just gonna end up saying something I don't want to say. So why don't you cover what was said this week, huh?
Yeah, so she's sticking with, like I said, she's sticking with her guns. She's still, she's still solid in the statement that she thinks that Philip Zadina is not going to compete for a roster spot in 2019. And 2020, and I just think that's an interesting statement because I just don't it's just she's really the only one who's saying it, and it's nothing against her. I mean, if she can, if that's her opinion that she forms, then that's great. I mean, that's her insider information, and that's what I think. A lot of people do end up trusting her opinion because she's close to the organization, but no one else is saying anything about the fact that he's not going to be competing for a roster spot. I mean, obviously. You'd love him to, but I mean, her reasoning is just bad. I think is the main issue, and what she said, he's not. It's because of the lack of NHL or AHL dominance. I think it was.
Yeah, she's saying he's a long shot. He's a long shot, and that it's unlikely he'll challenge for the spot. I'm like, dude, I'm just completely taken aback by that. I mean, it's one thing to say that, hey, not sure if he's going to make it. There's some other good competition that he's going to have, he's going to have to deal with. But to say that you don't even think, like, you're basically saying right off the bat, hey, don't count on it. Don't even get it out of your head. The guy's not going to play in Detroit next year to start the season. And to me, that's completely contradicts what I've heard from even a lot of the Red Wings like announcers like Ken Kal and Art Regner and them, like during the development camp, like sure seems to me like they want to give these guys every opportunity. And Yzerman's talked to him about what he needs to work on. I don't get any sense from Zadina that he thinks he's a long shot. I mean, and obviously he's not going to come out and say, yeah, I'm a long shot to make it. But at the same time, like I don't, like you said, I'm not hearing that sentiment from anybody else that like the pessimistic view of his ability to, make the Red Wings. It doesn't, I'm not hearing that anywhere else. And it's just weird to me. I mean, just because the guy didn't score 40 goals in the AHL last year. I mean, if you want him to go put up 30-something goals like Pulkkinen and Furk, go for it. I mean, that's great. If but we already saw those guys came up here. They could not get, anywhere with the Red Wings. I mean, they didn't even stick with the teams that they got picked up from on waivers. So maybe the concern is that, he's going to have to do these other things so that he doesn't get put in that same position.
Yeah.
But I hope by domination she's not referring to he needs to score 30, 40 goals in the AHL because we've already seen guys do that and it didn't matter when they got up here.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. I was looking on Twitter. Someone actually responded. I don't know if you see your tweet that you sent to Helene St. James, and I wanted to kind of read it off to you because I wasn't sure if you saw it or just read it out on the podcast. This is Jeffrey Thibbert. I think you say his name is @Homestyle_Melt on Twitter. Shout out to you. But he said dominating in the NHL doesn't just come down to points. It's seeing him play the game in the right way, not being a defensive liability, being strong on the puck. He improved almost every game in the NHL and has a chance to show when he's ready. So I think that's kind of an interesting concept when, you're sort of saying, well, it's not the dominance itself isn't just scoring a bunch of points. It's, like I said, not being a defensive liability, being strong in the puck, which I think he's shown last year in the AHL. He looked like he belonged. Like I said, he still obviously has some room to grow, and maybe that does mean he starts on Grand Rapids next year. But I don't think he sends, like you mentioned earlier, I don't think he spends a significant amount of time in Grand Rapids. Neither Veleno either. I think both of them spend some, they spend a little bit of time, or at least start the season in Grand Rapids, and I think they both make their way up to the main roster. I just thought that was kind of an interesting comment.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, and I hope that's what we're talking about too with dominating, because it's great if you can score a bunch of goals at the AHL, but I mean, we've already seen that doesn't always project to success at the NHL level, because we've seen two guys that at one point Håkan Andersson was comparing Pulkkinen's shot to Brett Hall's. I mean, you got to get yourself open, and you got to get your shot off fast. Furk's issue is that he wasn't accurate enough, and he didn't really bring anything else. So, I think Zadina is a special player. So I do agree that he's got to be defensively. He can't be a defensive liability, and he's got to be able to get separation. And if he can't do that, then he needs more seasoning, and that's fine. But to come right out and say, he basically has no chance of making it, he's a long shot. Like, I don't know. I mean, to me, the skills that he does bring to the table, when you're looking at a team that's, the bottom 10 in scoring in the league, you're telling me you couldn't, benefit from a guy like that? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I don't want to hurt the guy's career by bringing him up too early if he ain't ready. But still, I mean, it just seems funny to me that, somehow Christopher N or Jacob De La Rose are more NHL ready than Philip Zadina right now. I mean, they must be, pretty amazing at what they do on the third and fourth line, because I don't know. I see a guy that looked like he was pretty hungry out there to make a difference when he did play in the 9 games he was here. So not even going to get into Ablucator.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about free agency at all before we kind of wrap up today?
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about free agency. I think that's definitely an interesting thing. I actually just saw something on Twitter that I want to point out really quick, that I thought was interesting. So if I can find it, I just lost it. Well, anyway, so there was someone that, the Red Wings have obviously, thought about trading for some people, and I can't find here, Gord Miller from TSN, is basically, he tweeted out, someone asked him a question. He goes, my mentions are open, for a little bit. He goes, fire some questions. And someone asked, I think about he just said Sabres ? And he said, I think Ristolainen gets dealt. And it's just like, oh. And maybe if a guy like Rasmus Ristolainen is available, is that someone you're interested in if you're the Red Wings? Or, obviously he would be a pretty expensive acquisition, but what are kind of some of your thoughts there on?
I don't know enough about him to say that I would like to have him or not, because I don't know. Compared to some of the other, is he better than what we have now? Probably. Yeah. Anytime you put Jonathan Ericsson in that conversation, I'm probably going to say yeah, but I don't know what he's worth. I don't know. I couldn't really guess what it would take to get someone like that, especially in our own division with a team that's competing against us to get the rebuild moving here. So, that's a good point. It's interesting. I didn't know that he was available. He's a pretty young guy still, isn't he?
Yeah, he's pretty young. I think he's 24, if I'm not mistaken.
So why would they be giving up on him already?
I don't know. That's a good question. I honestly don't know. I'm not sure what their reasoning is behind it, or he might be older than that. Actually, I'm gonna make myself not sound like an idiot and look that up. I think he's 24. Ristolainen.
Did you happen to see this other tweet from Gord Miller?
No, I hadn't seen
an NHL GM on what he's trying to accomplish today. I'm trying to move out bad contracts so I can give out some more tomorrow. That's pretty clever.
Yeah.
That's pretty
he
funny.
Is 24. Yeah, I thought that's what I thought.
Why would they be giving up on a 24? Obviously there's a reason behind size.
It. Last year he had 5 goals and 38 assists for 43 points. With the Sabres. He had a good season last year. He played 78 games. He was the former first-round pick in 2013. So I don't know why they're so eager to get rid of him. I'm sure it'd probably take a lot to get rid of him, but I'm sure they have a high asking price for.
That just seems weird to me.
That does seem weird to me. Yeah.
I don't.
But hey, that's definitely. They've been tied to other defensemen too. I know. I'm not necessarily. Well, I guess Shane Gostisbehere isn't necessarily. He's not really a free. I think he's a restricted free agent at the end of the season. I can't remember exactly. I know they want. I heard. Ty. I'm not necessarily sure if I'm jump on someone like Gostisbehere per se. He's
well, I think we might know one of the reasons why Ristolainen might be available to trade. Have you looked at his plus minus ratings at all?
Yeah, it's minus.
It's minus 41, minus 25, minus 9, minus 21, minus 32. I don't know how much you want to put. You think about how bad that Buffalo team was before they got Eichel. They were pretty much trying to give people a way to make that team bad. So that was what, a couple years, 3-4 years ago they did that.
Yeah,
but last year to be negative 41.
Yeah,
that's so there's something there. There's something going on there, and I think part of it is probably that he's coming out of his entry level contract. I'm guessing, and he's looking to make bigger money, and they obviously don't think he's worth it. So they're going to trade him rather than hold on to him and pay him big money or lose him for nothing. That's probably what that comes down to.
That's at least. What
I don't know. Plus minus is not a.
It's not a definitive, but as a defenseman, I think your plus minus is worrying if it's that. The kid scored 40. You're on the ice a significant amount of time as a defenseman. He's a first. I'm pretty sure he's their first line defenseman. He plays alongside what's his name, Rasmus Dahlin. So
if you're playing with Dahlin and your advanced stats are still bad too, that's kind of I don't know.
Well, their GM, Botterill, or however you say it, Jason.
Yeah, Jason Botterill.
Yeah. Botterill, yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like I've been seeing reports that saying, that Ristolainen will likely be dealt. Because he said that they have options in the blue line. And he basically said that Botterill basically said they have flexibility with the lineup, which is interesting. I don't know. I get they just drafted Dahlin, but I mean, this kid's good. I mean, this is a 24-year-old defenseman who's still got plenty left in the tank. I don't know how he must. I guess they must not want to pay him the big money if he's, but that's definitely interesting. Were there any other free agents that you kind of wanted to mention or that kind of stood out? Because like I mentioned, I said Shane Gotchesbeard, and we saw PK Subban was traded to the I guess he wasn't a free agent, but he was traded to the Devils, which I thought was interesting because I know he was brought up in conversation with the Red Wings as well. I wanted to stay away from PK Subban at all costs in terms of the Red Wings, but I mean, were there any other players you kind of had your eyes on, I guess, in terms of free agency rather than trading, I guess I should say?
I think the only two players that I have any real interest in looking at would be Dzingel, who played for Columbus for a little bit. I think he could be a good, someone that wouldn't cost us an arm and a leg that puts up some points. He's still a young guy that I think, you could, it probably wouldn't. I'm just concerned about giving out too much term right now.
Yeah.
So that's one guy. And then, if you're really swinging for a home run, like if you really feel that like a guy like Green is not going to work out, like this year because of his virus that keeps coming back. I mean, they could look at a guy like Jake Gardiner, but we're actually looking at bringing on Max Bultman from The Athletic here. We've just been trying to connect with him, and he just responded that he's actually good to go. So we're going to try to bring Max in, and that's one of the questions we're going to have for him is just free agency-wise. Is there any rumblings that we're hearing? So I don't know about you, Chase, but why don't we try to bring in Max?
Yeah, all right. Sounds good.
Hey, Max.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, Max. How you doing? This is Jason, and we got Chase on the line, too.
Oh, perfect. How we going, guys?
How you doing?
So we've just been talking about the draft, and then we also hit on on development camp, and we're talking a little bit about free agency. So we just had some questions for you about a few of those topics, and I'm gonna let Chase kind of kick it off if you're cool with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we started off our episode a little bit. We were talking about the 2019 draft, and we just kind of want to get your thoughts on Moritz Seider. Obviously, that was definitely a pick that we saw that was more out of left field, but we kind of want to get your thoughts on some of the things that you've seen, because I know Jay and I do like the pick, so we kind of want to get some of your thoughts on what the pick was like, and kind of what went through your head when you were when you saw the pick out of Mannheim.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always straight into scramble mode to figure out everything I can about the player. So I had done some prep work on a couple of the other guys who I thought they might take there, just so that I could probably get a little jump start on the story. So obviously Seider wasn't one of those guys. I didn't know a ton about him, but the more I've seen of him, I've been really impressed. I mean, I thought he was outstanding this week at development camp. I went through an article I posted this morning, a couple of the shifts that I thought really showed the offensive ability, which I think was the concern a lot of people had right after the pick. And he's clearly willing to try stuff. He skates great. I think he had a little bit better puck control than I expected coming into the development camp. And then just having gone back and watched some of his stuff from Mannheim, there's a really well-rounded player in there. And frankly, I don't think he's that raw either. So I think that there's a good combination of floor and ceiling. And if he can really tap into some of the offense and get the top pair potential out of there, which certainly not a given, and you never want to make that the bar for somebody, so to speak. But when you're pick 6 overall, there are fairly high expectations, and he has all the ability to meet them. It's just a question of what's going to happen from here.
Okay, yeah, great.
It seemed like it seemed like part of the reason he might have been initially ranked so low is because it didn't seem like people knew a lot about his offensive ability, and playing in the DEL, that league obviously doesn't get the kind of coverage that you see in Canadian hockey or even in Sweden. I mean, did you get the sense that's why he was ranked so low, is just the unknown about what he could deliver offensively?
Yeah, I mean, he just didn't play very many minutes this year. So he was playing amongst men, and he was playing not very often. And I think those two combinations, by necessity, are going to combine to limit your offense, right? Because number one, if you're not on the ice very much, you're not going to put up many points. And if you're a 17-year-old playing amongst men, number one, you're probably not going to be taking very many liberties because you're trying to prove yourself that you belong. And that would be my guess. And you never want to make excuses for somebody. I mean, but I don't think it's really making excuses to just point out kind of the obvious situation that he was in. And I do think that if he was in the CHL, maybe had posted, I mean, obviously the numbers couldn't have been similar in the CHL, but looked about the same way. The numbers would have been a lot more eye-catching, I guess, so to speak. And so I think people knew who this guy was, right? He was going to be a first-round pick. He was probably going to go in the early teens or maybe as high as the back of the top 10. You never know. Like it's entirely possible this guy was going in the top 10 either way. So just because a lot of us maybe weren't expecting it does not mean that he was not very much on the radar for a lot of teams.
So I know obviously there were a lot of prospects that you had in mind in terms of the 6th overall draft pick. Many of them probably including centers, guys like Trevor Zegras, as a possibility. So what is drafting Moritz-Seider kind of say for the Red Wings' confidence and Yzerman's confidence for guys like maybe like a Joe Veleno? Do you think that's sort of where that confidence is coming behind that defenseman pick? Whereas they're saying, we're confident that a guy like Veleno can step in and sort of play that center role, and we didn't really need to, address the center. We need to address defense more than that.
Well, I think that they probably make these picks a lot like longer term down the road. Like I do think that like Joe Veleno, but I don't think that they would jeopardize a asset like the 6th overall pick by kind of saying, oh well, we're already set there when it's so early. Like so much could happen with everything between now and let's say 2024, 2025 that if Trevor Zegras turns out to be a 70, 80 point player or something like that, like you don't want to be like, oh well, we had this two-way guy we really liked. And when you're talking about 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, but I do think that there's something in your point that I think is really interesting about kind of the value of a right-handed skilled defenseman. I think there's a kind of a I agree with this about drafting for need being kind of silly in the top 10, and I don't think that's what they were doing. Mm-hmm. But what I do think it maybe does get a little lost is that even if they don't think that maybe Moritz-Seider is going to put up the craziest amount of points of anybody drafted in that slot, certainly you couldn't say you expect that based on everything you've had so far. But the value of a really good right-shot defenseman who could potentially play on the top pair and could potentially play against other teams' top lines while showing a little bit of offensive ability as well, those guys really just don't come available. So if you want one, you have to take them when they're there. And so that I think is a really good point. That's kind of what you're getting at is that you can't really find a guy like that unless you're willing to spend a really high draft pick on them.
Yeah, it seems like with something like that, you can't just wait for the perfect like value like situation. Like okay, there wasn't any chance they were going to get Bowen Byram. So to me, it's kind of like taking Moritz-Seider. If they really believe that much in him that he can be, a top pairing, two-way defenseman like that, there's not a lot of opportunities to get a quality player like that and develop them and have them in your franchise for a long time. So yeah, it does seem like at some point you're gonna have to commit a draft pick, to get someone like that. And as much as I would have loved to have seen them, pick up a guy as creative as Zegras from a playmaking standpoint, you can't deny how big of a need it was, even though they weren't drafting for need per se. It's kind of hard to look at what he did in playing with men, and now what he looked like just seeing him for a little bit this week, that he wasn't a pretty quality pick for them. So.
Yeah, and Zegras is going to be a great player. I think he was one of the most exciting players I watched this year, and I think he's going to make Anaheim really, really happy. And certainly, I think Detroit could have made the case that certainly they did. They needed him too, right? They need someone to give Filip Zadina the puck. They need a really good second line center for their future. And I'm not saying that Moritz Seider is going to be a second pair, a first pair of defensemen, but he does have that potential upside, and I think. Like you're getting at, when that's there, sometimes you can't wait for the perfect, pick value chart to line up. And, it sounds like Seider was clearly by definition, right? They liked him more than they liked those other guys because they took him. So I think at some point you got to be willing to be patient and see what happens and how he develops.
All right, so I want to transition here a little bit to the development camp. I know you just released an article earlier this morning about some of the players that you kept your eye on in development camp. Do you want to kind of break down some of your thoughts on that article and some of the players you were paying attention to?
Yeah. Anyone in particular you want me to start with?
Not necessarily. I mean, just really anything. I mean, I guess if there were certain prospects besides Seider from 2019 that you necessarily had your eyes on, or just anything in the last couple of years, I think would be or just.
Berggren was one that you brought up. I think.
Yeah, Berggren. Yeah, exactly.
Berggren is a guy that we didn't get to hear much about because he was injured all last year. How did he look coming back from his injury?
So he was really kind of cautious going through the drills in the first couple of days. But I thought that he looked outstanding once they got into the scrimmage play. I mean, he did, avoid physical contact for obvious reasons, and he maybe didn't go as hard into the corners as he might in 2 or 3 months from now. But I thought he looked like the best guy out there, skating, between his control of the play. He didn't always take it maybe to the net, but he would do these wide looping circles where he really possessed the puck for just long stretches, and then would fit the puck into really tight windows that ultimately would result in a nice chance. And I think that really defines for him to be able to do that without really going into the corners, because I assume because of his back injury that he's still recovering from, really does define what he's capable of doing as a player. He's dynamic. Joe Veleno called him dynamic. The skill level is clear. And, if everything works for this guy, if he can get his body to the point where he can really physically withstand what the physical demands of the pro game are, I think there's a top 6 forward in there. And I think he's a really skilled, talented player who's going to go back to Sweden this year. And if he's able to stay healthy, there's a lot to be excited about. Some of the 2019 guys, obviously I liked Albin Greva, as I think I think a lot of people did. He's an exciting prospect as well, just because he does the things that stand out, right?
So how do you say that name? Because now I've heard it like three different ways. Greve. How do you say it?
It's not Gruve, right?
Okay.
So
okay.
That would make sense because then you're getting both the W sound and the V sound. So the way I have heard it is kind of like gray, like the color, and va, like VUH. So Greva.
Okay.
But it's not that pronounced at the end, right? It's not Greva. It's I'm struggling with it too, but I've got a Swedish friend named Lars who I sometimes ask for pronunciations and stuff like that, and the closest I could get was kind of Greva. It's kind of a blend at the end there between an E and a U sound. So I say Greva.
Yeah, Chase and I were talking about him earlier in today's episode, and I was telling him that I'm really going to be excited to see this guy's development, because he seems like he's both, he's got the skill set that they want, the hockey IQ, but just to be such a pain in the ass to play against. Like, we really haven't had that many players in our system that have that balance. I know earlier on they were kind of hoping that that's what they would get from a guy like a Giovanni Smith, who kind of struggled a little bit, last year getting acclimated to the AHL. But this seems like another one of those guys that's both skilled enough to play on a scoring line, but really has that, that physical factor to his game that just the Red Wings don't seem to get a lot of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, for context, like throughout the week this week, he went bar down as much as anybody that I saw. Like it seemed like every drill he finished with a really nice laser into the top of the net. It's not a particularly like hard shot. Like he doesn't have a bomb or anything, but you notice the ones that go off the crossbar a little bit, right? I think they always look a little. And he's got skill. He made a really nice pass in the slot with two guys on him to. Who was that? Chase Pearson, I think, in one of the I don't know if it was a 3-on-3 game or the scrimmage. That looked really good. But yeah, he's got a lot of skill. Like this is not just you'll notice the times where he runs over somebody because how can you not? But he's not just out there to be a wrecking ball. Like he does a lot of really good things with the puck too.
Another player I kind of want to mention, and we mentioned this earlier in the podcast as well, but we've kind of already talked about it, is Joe Veleno, someone who you mentioned in your article said had another really good development camp. What were some of your thoughts? And is he someone who possibly has a chance of making the main roster next year?
Yeah, sure. He's gonna have a chance because you never say never, and he's putting in the work. He's got a lot of talent. I expect him to be in Grand Rapids just because you saw how tough it was at times for Philip Zadina to make that transition from the Quebec League to even the American League. I don't think it's safe to assume that Joe Veleno is going to be immune from that. I mean, the Red Wings aren't hurting for a center so bad they need to rush somebody. But if Veleno comes in and really proves himself and shows, that he's ready, I don't think they're going to hold him back for holding them back's sake. But I think they want to do whatever's best for him, and my guess is that's going to be going to Grand Rapids. But yeah, he looked good. I don't think he blew anybody away, but because you know what you're getting with him. You're getting a really great skater who scored a couple of pretty timely goals through the tournament. I don't think he was maybe like I think Berggren was more in control of the game maybe than Veleno was, and they were on the same team for the scrimmage. But Veleno had the big moment, and he stands out so much for just how well he moves out there, right? Like Joe Veleno is going to be a guy who's skating people obviously really like for a lot of years.
Yeah, from what I was reading, they were saying that they've been showing him a lot, working with him a lot, and showing a lot of tape of Larkin, and they've been trying to work with him on continuing to have that two-way game and be responsible defensively too. So I've heard that on more than one occasion. I think Tyler Wright was saying you just you hate to compare him to a player like that, but they really see that he's got a lot of the same skill sets.
Yeah, Sean Horkoff, I think it was, and I'm sure that's the beautiful thing about having Larkin in the system is for them is that he can be held up as an example for a lot of guys. I mean, Larkin was taken at number 15 overall. Veleno was probably projected to go a little closer to that than he did at 30. So I think it's really easy for them to be able to hold him up and say, look, you should use what Dylan has been able to accomplish. And how he's been able to do it as a blueprint. And it's really hard to ask anybody to have as much growth and as much, gains in their game as what Dylan Larkin has had. But I think anytime for the Red Wings that they can hold him up and say, look at what this guy's accomplished and look at how hard he's worked to get there. It's got to be a great thing for the development staff to hold up.
What did you think about Hirose this week? Because I was impressed. Every time I watch that guy, he always seems to see, who's open. He always seems to make some really good plays, and he scored some pretty good goals in the development camp too, I thought.
Yeah, no, Hirose was good. I think that's what you want to see from a guy who's, just turned 23 this morning. Or I don't know, I guess what time of day, but his birthday's today. And, he was playing against a lot of guys who he was really able to outskill, and he had a great shot at one point for a goal, his kind of trademark playmaking. He had a nice shootout goal. Like he looked like a guy who has played in the NHL and produced in the NHL out there among some prospects at some times. So yeah, he really good. And I think, that was about what they were hoping for from him.
What did you see from Kuffner though? Because they were both brought in at the same time, and obviously Hirose had some production there. Kuffner didn't seem to be able to do that, but he seemed to do pretty good in camp. A lot of talk about he showed up and did a pretty good job this week. Any thoughts about what you saw from him and whether it looks like he's going to more than likely he's probably going to start out the season in Grand Rapids, wouldn't you say?
That would be my guess, yeah. But I think Kuffner had his moments too, and I think for a guy who didn't maybe get the same have the same breakout when he arrived in Detroit at the end of last year. I'm sure it was probably nice for him to put the puck in the net a couple of times and look really strong. He had the setup on Veleno's game tying goal at the end of the scrimmage, across the ice through traffic, and that was a really nice play. And I think I'm sure that was really nice for Ryan. But he's a good player, and I think if he is in Grand Rapids to start the year, certainly there's not exactly a deep log jam to get some minutes in Detroit, here, and whether it's this year or whenever. I don't think the line is so long that he won't be able to crack it at some point again.
One other guy that stood out to me was Jack Adams. Did you see anything from him that you liked? Because I saw him in camp. I've been to the last couple of Red Wings camps, and I've been following him a little bit. He seemed to have a pretty good showing. I mean, he's a big guy, but he moves well, and he's definitely got a shot as well. Yeah,
he had a really nice breakaway goal, I think, where he outskated Veleno for one.
Yeah, he actually took the puck from him, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I know the Red Wings liked what they saw out of him. They just want him to basically keep it up and be in good shape and kind of let things come to him in terms of his role at Union. It can sometimes be tough for those college guys to maybe get the same role as some of the guys playing in the Canadian major junior leagues because they're playing with such older guys and more experienced guys and a really high quality competition level. So I don't know what Jack's situation necessarily was all the time at Union, but certainly, like you said, I mean, he's noticeable out there through this week, and I think we'll see what happens with him going forward.
So I kind of wanted to highlight someone we didn't really see a lot at camp because of injury, which was Filip Zadina. There were some comments, I'm not sure if you saw, by Helene St. James, who basically kind of said that, don't get your hopes up for him competing for a main roster spot next year. I just kind of want to get some of your comments based on that, like what you think Filip Zadina's role is with the team next year, since we didn't really get to see much from him from camp.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be decided in Traverse City, I'm sure. I certainly think he's going to have every opportunity to make his case and win a spot on the team. He's going to be in Detroit training pretty quick here. He went back to the Czech Republic for a couple of days. But he'll be back, and then he's going to be on I believe, a pretty similar program to what Dennis Cholowski was on last year when he made a bit of a surprise run and grabbed a roster spot for the whole first half of the season, basically off of what he accomplished in the offseason and at training camp. And I think Filip Zadina will have the same opportunity to do that. But, it's hard to predict what's going to happen because it will all depend on what he's able to show when he arrives. They want him more explosive. He actually hurt the hamstring, the reason he was out working on his lower body, and it's not hard to draw a direct parallel to that kind of directive. They want him to be able to separate a little bit more from guys as he takes the puck up ice and not get chased down or not get as much pressure from behind to really let him unleash some of the goal scoring ability that he very clearly has. So we'll see where it comes in, but I'm not going to make any predictions as of right now. But as I've been kind of writing and saying, I don't see any reason why he categorically can't be on the roster.
Yeah, we're on the same page. I think some of the just some of the stuff that we were seeing, Helene seems to be the only one that's really saying it this way. But we saw one article where he was considered a long shot to make the team. Another, or in another one, it's unlikely he'll challenge for a spot. And it's just like, well, it seems funny to me that the number 6 pick that has that skill set on a team that's struggling to score goals, he would be a long shot. I mean, I don't think they should rush him by any means, but it just seems to me like that he, they would want to give him every opportunity to make it, and if he's not ready, he's not ready.
Well, the part of it that you can't forget is that he did just get a little bit of a stretch in the NHL last year. When he got back down to Grand Rapids, he wasn't really producing like he had been prior to that, and you can try and diagnose the reasons to that. My thought, and Philip kind of said something to this extent at development camp, is that there's a certain style of game that's going to fit his game better than others, and it is probably closer to the NHL game. But I think it's a fair stance to take that at some point you have to learn how to play some of the muckier hockey, and ideally the Red Wings wouldn't kind of use him in those situations. But it's hard to score goals in the AHL, and I think there's value in that, in him going through that. Certainly from Detroit's perspective, that's how they approached it. I do think that come early in the season, maybe it's not opening night. I don't know what's going to happen here in free agency, but I expect to see him in Detroit quite a bit this season. But I don't think that it's I don't think it's unfair to highlight that they didn't have an unbelievable return trip to Grand Rapids after his call up last year.
Right. The only other thing we had that I wanted to see if you could touch on a little bit is, we got free agency coming up tomorrow. I read your article on some of the guys that you thought that they might be taking a look at, and one of the guys that intrigues me is Jake Gardiner. I mean, have you heard anything at all about how Mike Green's recovery is from his virus that returned last year, and do you think that might have an impact on whether or not they might look at trying to bring in an offensive defenseman like that to kind of fill that gap of having an offensive skilled defenseman in there to kind of mentor some of the other guys versus bringing in some kind of another veteran that we probably don't need to be spending money on right now?
Well, I think Gardner would certainly qualify as a veteran.
He is a veteran, but I mean, I guess, I'm saying versus going with a guy like another Daly type or something like that they brought in a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, to answer the first part of your question about Green, we did ask Yzerman about it right before the draft, and he seemed to have kind of generally, positive outlook, but there wasn't like a quote or anything hard and fast about Mike Green. I personally am not sure how much certainty you can place on him based on the nature of that. Like so was it the start of the year and then the end of the year? Like, let's see what happens with all the exertion there. But I think, to me, Gardner would make sense, either way. I think that, the only question is the term and the cap hit, and that's a real question. But in terms of a this year perspective, and especially in terms of a next year perspective, when really the only defenseman who they have on a non-entry level contract next year is Danny DeKeyser. So adding a little bit more veteran presence, certainly a really strong, mobile offensive defenseman in Gardner makes a lot of sense for just the composition of the team. The question is, number one, are they going to get into a bidding war with other teams who are maybe more contention ready for someone like Jake Gardner to make a big offer to him and for him to really want to uproot his life and go to. So that'd be question one. And then number two, are they comfortable locking that in? He'd almost certainly have to be the highest paid player on the team with the longest running contract on the team. And so that's a real question of if you want to get into that territory.
It doesn't sound like from Yzerman's previous interviews that he's looking to make a splash, and I think that'd be, with that kind of term and that kind of money, I would define that as a splash. So it seems to me like it doesn't seem like something that they were looking to do, but it does look like a possibility. I think it does make some sense too. I just was curious if you've heard any rumblings about him at all, or any other players that the Wings might have been talking to, because we especially with Yzerman on board, you really don't hear a lot. He seems to keep things pretty close to the vest. So
I would agree.
Chase, did you have anything on free agency?
I guess there were not a ton on free agency. I guess there were a couple trades I wanted to address. I guess it sounds like Buffalo kind of has Rasmus Ristolainen available, and I thought that was kind of interesting considering his price tag is probably pretty big, but I'm not sure if necessarily Detroit would be interested in him. But there's definitely some interesting players that we mentioned, because like Torrey Krug, I think we mentioned in a previous episode, would possibly available coming up. Is there any do you see Yzerman sort of, I guess I'll kind of segue into a question, do you see Yzerman making any big trades like something like that, or would you rather, or do you think he's just gonna stay put? I know he's kind of stayed quiet about a lot of his moves, but he hasn't necessarily denounced the fact that he's going to be making any trades, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah,
it's just the nature of those things, right, is like a lot of things have to come together for it. I'm sure he doesn't have a hard and fast rule that he needs to make one or two trades before camp starts, but I'm sure it's not off the table either. It did sound like, I think he made a comment right before the draft that he said that he'd probably look to free agency before the trade route to try and find some pieces. But the free agent market, as I kind of was exploring a few days ago, I really don't see that many fits like that are difference that make a big difference for them. Maybe they just want a 1-year guy who they can put in the room with and maybe on a line with some of the younger players who are probably going to be up this year. I think that would make sense. I noted I thought Jonas Donskoy could make sense for them, but I think he's going to have a lot of interest from teams that may be a little more playoff ready. So in the end, if they end up sitting on their hands, I think that's a totally fine approach for them just based on where they're at. And I think the same would go trade-wise. Like, you make a deal if there's a really good deal to be made, but you certainly don't rush into it.
Cool. Chase, did you have anything else?
No, I think that's it for me. So,
hey, Max.
How about you, Jay?
No, I'm good. Max, thank you very much for coming on. We really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Sorry I couldn't jump on for the beginning.
No worries. Yeah, no, it's fine.
No worries at all, man. Take care of yourself. Thanks again.
Thanks very much. Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, so that was our interview with Max Bultman. We want to thank Max for joining us on our episode today. We hit on a few important topics, and we're going to try to bring Max on in the future, and we're working on trying to bring in some other guests in the future as well. So if there's anybody in particular that you guys would like to hear us chat with on any particular topics, please let us know. But more importantly, I'll let them know, because that's probably the most effective way to get them to join in. So we're definitely going to keep trying to bring some folks in here, some other podcasts that we're working with as well that both Chase and I have been in contact with. We want to try and bring some different voices to the show at times. But for me, I don't really have anything else for this particular episode. Chase, is there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I think we covered it all. Yeah, that was a really solid episode, I think, all around. We got some good stuff, and we didn't really dive into it too much. I know we talked a lot about Moritz Seider this week, but I think in future episodes we'll definitely break down some of the other picks that that the Red Wings drafted as well, a little bit more in depth, because I know we definitely both have some thoughts on those. So, but yeah, I think that's all. At least I want to cover for this week's episode. I appreciate you guys listening again. Thanks to Max Bultman for coming on this week. Really shout out to him for coming out and talking to us, which is great. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview. If you guys are looking for more of that, there will be, like Jay said, there'll be more of it. Be sure to let us know who you guys want us to hear, talk to, and we'll try to get them on. So, again, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode, and I think we're signing off.
Yep. Take care, guys. Let's see what happens in free agency, and we'll be prepared to cover that in the next one.